just realized that you can't really talk about African development until you fix the energy issue. I realized like energy was really like the foundation. And then you zone into places like Sierra Leone, and when we started, it was 95% of people without access to electricity. And electricity, if you think about it, is the foundation of any modern economy. And the Pan-African dream.
Okay. Boom! What's up, guys? Welcome back to my channel. My name is Joe Hatagwa from Authentic African, and I just spent 4 years living in West Africa. And if you want to know why somebody would go to an Ivy League institution in the United States, then move to Sierra Leone to start a solar business, then this is the video for you. Okay, cool. So today we are talking to Nthabi. Nthabi is a multiple award winner, leaders in Africa, a number of different awards that she's won on the continent of Africa for the work that they are doing with Easy Solar in Sierra Leone. She is the COO of Easy Solar. Easy Solar is voted one of the best companies to work for in Sierra Leone, one of the few 4 private institutions that you find in the country. They supply solar all over the country. They have a number of different products that they provide, and she's gonna talk us through why it is that she left Ivy League world in the United States and co-founded this company with her co-founder. So without further ado, let's get right into it. All right, guys, we're back with another episode of Authentic African Entrepreneurs. I'm here at the Easy Solar office, a solar company and many other things here in Freetown, Sierra Leone. But before we jump into the interview, I want to do this lady justice. So I want to walk through her background, a little bit about Nthabi before we get into the interview. So I'm here with Nthabiseng Mosia, or Nthabi. So she is passionate about crafting solutions at the nexus of energy, fintech, and development. In 2015, she co-founded Easy Solar, a leading distribution company in West Africa, making energy and financial services affordable and accessible. They are a team of over 800 people passionate about energy access and financial inclusion, and to date have reached over 1 million beneficiaries in Sierra Leone and Liberia. And I'm excited to be here with her today.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for doing this. I really appreciate it. I think your story is interesting. I am familiar with Easy Solar, of course, because if you're in Sierra Leone, you have a lot of physical activations. I was at an event and I saw a keke last year. Yeah. You guys had some kind of contest, right, for the person to win?
Yeah, the keke.
So I've seen a ton of your stuff, and then the signage, right? I'm not a big fan of generators. I'm big on renewable energy, and this is a renewable company. And so I'm really excited to talk to you about your story and about the company. Now, I always like to start with a little bit about yourself. So, Nthabi, you are, if I'm not mistaken, Ghanaian and South African, right?
Half, yep.
Half and half, okay. So can you talk a little bit about your family background? Where were you born and where were you raised?
Yeah, sure. So my mom is Ghanaian and my dad is South African. I was born in Ghana. Got a bit of a convoluted story because I think when people hear I'm South African, Ghanaian, and then started a company in Sierra Leone and Liberia, they ask what the hell? And my short answer is usually I'm the Pan-African dream.
Okay.
But no, I mean, I think a more contextualized answer is I think I come from a legacy of what I call freedom fighters. So on my mom's side, her father was part of Kwame Nkrumah's at first, administration. So he was part of literally the first post-colonial government in Africa. And he died when she was quite young, but before they kind of moved around a lot on the continent. So he was part of a diplomatic service in North Africa. Yeah. And when he died, they had to move back. So I think she has kind of that international Pan-African side of her. And then my dad was born in the apartheid era in South Africa, which if anybody knows what apartheid is, yes. Very inspired by Jim Crow and a bit of the Nazis, and grew up with this idea that black people were somehow inferior, and that was institutionalized.
Right.
And later on in his life realized that that's not okay, and left the country, was classified a terrorist by the apartheid government, and so was forced to flee. And he tells the story how the police came to his mother's house, threatened to beat her up if she didn't tell them where he was. And a couple of weeks later, he crossed the border, the Mozambican border, eventually ended up in Angola for 10 years and was a guerrilla fighter. So literally fighting the Boers for 10 years. And then there was rumors that Mandela was going to be released. There was a lot of people who were trying to invest in those freedom fighters and encourage them to go study. And so one of the places that he was, got a scholarship to was Ghana. And so he went to Legon, our campus, and then met my mom. on Valentine's Day on a bus, on a trotro. Anybody who knows Ghana?
Trotro, yes, of course.
And so, yeah, like I think that's a meeting of those two worlds of people who are like part of liberation struggles and believed in Africa and believed in its potential. And I grew up with that. I grew up with these stories of, yeah, people just not accepting the narrative of Africa just being inferior or behind because, like, you know, we're suspended in animation. Like, there's always a history. And so I was always on the lookout for, like, what my calling and passion would be, because I was like, oh, well, my family has these great stories.
Right.
And my dad literally spent half of his life fighting for freedom. And so, yeah, it was interesting that kind of along the way, Sierra Leone, which was not expected, and this part of West Africa became like my cause and where I come home, and I think what the mission that I'm fighting for.
I wasn't expecting that family background. Wow, like yay! Like is it called the Big Six? Kwame Nkrumah, like they're all.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
Yeah, I learned about the Gala's background, and I thought it was very fascinating. And then of course you have that South African background, so revolutionaries.
Yeah, I could say I'm a British.
Nice. So where did you grow up? Did you grow up in Ghana?
I grew up in South Africa, so I was born in Ghana, and then 4 months later, so my dad got a scholarship again to study in the UK.
Okay.
So he was doing his master's there, and then Mandela was released, and then in 91 he went to Namibia. It still wasn't okay for him because he was like not allowed to go to South Africa. He was like banned or he'd be killed. So after 1991 he went back, and then 92 we moved back to South Africa, and he tells the story of it was just my mom, me and my sister and a suitcase, and he built his life from scratch, really had to rebuild his life with us. So yeah, I grew up basically all of my life in South Africa, but we would go home to my mom's family in Ghana every few years when we could afford to.
Okay, yeah. Nice. So where did you go to school for college and masters?
So I went to college in Cape Town, so in the University of Cape Town, kind of a hippie, very nature-based place, and I studied business. So I was focused on finance and accounting, and that was actually my trajectory. I was going to go work in investment banking. Did an internship, hated it. I think it's probably that thing of like, I'm not just going to spend my time and brain making rich people richer. Even though like I was like, it was kind of like a good prestigious career. We were the first generation to go to school, as Black people, go to university. So it was like, there was an expectation, I think, to do certain things. And so I was like, okay, investment banking, management consulting. So those are the two internships I did. And then, kind of was like, needed to take a break. The gap years were not a thing for Black people. So I did an internship, saved some money, and then went to India for a few months and traveled around, and then came back and did management consulting for 2 years. And it was there that I actually got a bit of training in like, what are some of the structural challenges on the continent? So I worked with Deloitte in the strategy division, and was fortunate enough to be in like 5 different African countries for different projects. And I just realized that you can't really talk about African development until you fix the energy issue. I realized like energy was really like the foundation. And so unfortunately on the continent, there weren't a lot of good energy programs. And I was like, if you're gonna try and like win over and like think about development, probably it's best to learn from the people who've done it already. So I was like, go to the halls of power, basically. And so I tried to apply to some of the top tier schools in America, and then was fortunate enough to get a scholarship to Columbia University. And it was in their energy program specifically. So looking at energy policy and financing, and a bit of a hybrid of the business and policy school.
Okay, yeah, at one point in time I was applying for Columbia.
Yeah.
So I'm familiar with a number of the different programs, but can you talk a little bit about this program in particular? So it was an energy program. Like what's the degree in? What did you learn through that process?
Yeah, sure. So the official title is a master's in international affairs, so focused on energy policy.
Okay.
And then I did a couple of courses at the business school. So I was really interested because of my finance background and management consulting. What I really wanted to do was kind of build large-scale utility projects, so like kind of big wind farms and solar farms, and do like the kind of financing on that, and understand like the policy structures you needed to have in place. So a lot of my courses were pretty much centered on either like what is global energy policy, what is like some of the project financing mechanisms, some legal sort of stuff. So how do you build a renewable energy framework in a context? And so I learned a lot about like how the US was, context of the US, Europe, And renewable energy was still a bit like, not fringe, but like it was not like nowadays I think everybody has accepted climate is a big thing, renewable energy is the future. But I think like 10 years ago, I guess, when I first started, it was not. So I think there was like a few examples, but yeah, most of my courses were really tailored around that, and then some economics and like pure finance stuff as well. Yeah.
Okay, so I understand that you also met your co-founders
I did, yes.
from EV Solar at Columbia. So can you talk through the origins, you guys meeting and eventually coming up with the idea for Easy Solar?
Yeah, I mean, I just want to caveat that I never thought I was going to be an entrepreneur. I thought like that's what you do when you have money and networks and power and like a lot of security, and it's what rich, privileged kids from a certain demographic do. Not naming names. But yeah, I think, I stumbled into it. So I was in a course which was focused on like energy solutions to a developing world context. So I can't remember the exact name of the course, but it was like taught by a practitioner who had actually helped build companies in Africa and India focused on energy. So from a different context, whether it's in cooking or electrification. And I was with one of my co-founders, Eric, in that class. He had kind of been working on an idea with some other people. And then in the class, we had to like come up with a business plan. And so that plan, we entered it into a competition called the D Prize. We won around $20,000, and that helped us fund like a survey. And then we were like kind of, I don't think we thought we were going to do it full time, but we just kind of kept entering as many competitions. And I think the good thing about Columbia, and I think a lot of the American schools, is there's this ecosystem around entrepreneurship. So whatever opportunity you take, like it's yours for the taking if you're quite proactive. So we entered another one, which was called like the Dean's Public Policy Prize, which is about finding a solution to a public problem. And we won that. We got $70,000 in total. And so our first year was really coming up with the idea in 2015. And then in December 2015, just at the tail end of Ebola, we ended up coming to Sierra Leone. It was my first time coming to Sierra Leone. Eric was in the Peace Corps before, so he had been living here for a couple of years. And then after his Peace Corps service, stayed on with some NGOs. So he had the background, he had the network. So when we came in, we went like, kind of, I was still fresh off the boat, literally, because when you have to come from Lungi, I think if anybody who's been here, it's like you literally take a boat. And I didn't take the speedboat, I took the ferry. So it was like, okay, what is this? But then when we started like doing the survey and like actually interacting with people, I was like, damn, this is like real energy poverty.
Right.
So you took what you were having, like learning contextually. And in South Africa, we had a grid. It just was, at the time there was something called load shedding. So it would go on and off. So I had grown up where most people had access to electricity, I think probably like the US or Europe, but it was unstable, right? So this was my first time like literally driving through and like it's dark, there's nothing. And I think that was the first like inclination of like, oh, I kind of get what you're saying, Eric. This is like a real like challenge, because he understood it contextually.
Right.
And a third co-founder joined shortly after that, and he has a tech background, Alex, so he's a computer scientist and electrical engineer by training. Right. And we met through a course as well, so I was in a course with him. Eric was not in that course.
Okay.
It was about technology solutions for developing countries. And we entered a couple of hackathons. I don't know if anybody knows what a hackathon is, but
I think a hackathon is an organization or anybody could put together there's a challenge that needs to be solved, and you have engineers basically working to try to solve that problem, right? I think that's the best way to just...
Yeah, it can be engineers or like, yeah, it's a mixture. But yeah, having an engineer there, because it's usually a tech problem. So yeah. And so we actually built a prototype of the smart tech in the solar system. So basically something that allows the solar to switch on and off.
Okay.
Which basically you can communicate with the device, right? And I'll explain what that means in the context of our business a bit later down the road. But we won the hackathon, and that like got one of the prizes was to go into an accelerator at the Columbia Business School. So for our last semester before graduating, we were in that like 4 to 5 month accelerator. So that's kind of like the whole Columbia experience. Yeah.
Got it. Okay. And then because Eric had been here for Peace Corps and worked at some NGOs. Okay. So and so he was the one to say, we need to do this in Sierra.
Yeah. I always knew I wanted to come back to the continent because, I think I'm like kind of, I have one foot in, one foot out, but like honestly, I've been most of my life in the continent, and so for me, school was always a way to like get what I needed from, the West or the first world and bring it back. But I never thought I would. I don't know. I had a lot of the misconceptions people have about Sierra Leone, or like, Ebola literally while we were in. I'm going to tell you a funny story, Eric. Maybe he's not going to be happy, but I don't know if you remember, there was a story in somebody from New York flew in from Sierra Leone to New York, and they were like patient zero, and they were like in quarantine, and they tested him, and then they realized he didn't actually have Ebola. That was Eric.
Oh, really? Wow. Okay.
So literally, he was like, he came just as the outbreak was happening.
Yeah.
And started grad school. And so my perception as well, even like, being in Colombia was like, there's this crazy, we started grad school in 2014.
Right.
And, started thinking about a company in Sierra Leone in mid 2015 where there was so yeah, I had this perception and, blood diamonds, Ebola, civil war. And this is me as an African who grew up in Africa, right? Like, so I think I try to be like understanding of people because there's 54 countries and, each one has its own identity, and often we get what's given to us, even as Africans, right? I think there's a misnomer that it's just foreigners. So I was pleasantly surprised by, I think, Eric's experience, but then also like when we came on ground and I was like, oh, okay. It's not like all falling apart. There's actually a lot of opportunity and a lot of, I would say I think Sierra Leone's, they just want to get on with it.
Sure.
And move forward. And I was like really encouraged by that because in South Africa, there's a lot of anger and people like a little bit entitled. And so for me, it was really great to see people that were hungry to, if you had the opportunity to go along the way with you.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think a place like this, which has many challenges, means that there are many opportunities, right? So on that, I want to start talking about Easy Solar and the business itself. I'd love to talk to you a little bit about some of the products and services, the product line of Easy Solar, because you guys are in financial services, you're in remittance, and a number of other businesses. So can we talk about Easy Solar and the many elements of Easy Solar?
Yeah, sure. So, I think at the heart of it and what we were trying to solve, even in 2015, when it was an idea on a paper or on a slide deck that we were pitching, was energy poverty. So I don't know if most people know, but just under 600 million Africans, and it's a continent of just over 1 billion people, lack access to a formal grid.
Right.
So that's in 2023. This is when we're talking about AI, we're talking about nanotechnology, we're talking about sending people to Mars potentially. I don't know if that's still a thing, but we're talking about advanced robotics. So and I think when I first realized that was like a reality, I was like, no, wait. And then you zone into places like Sierra Leone, and when we started, it was 95% of people without access to electricity. And electricity, if you think about it, is the foundation of any modern economy. I invite anybody who's watching to do a thought experiment. Go home, or if you're at home, try and switch off your grid and think about all the things that you can do. No internet, no phone, no fridge, all your stuff's gonna go off, no AC if you're, now we're even thinking about going to electric cars, so potentially like mobility, so, and then you think about industry and manufacturing. So like literally the world as we know it in most parts, that have electricity would be unthinkable without it. And so for me, that was the injustice that and I think all three of us were trying to solve, that how can we even talk about being competitive or part of the modern world if you don't have electricity? So that was the foundation of Easy Solar, and we really focused on markets, I think that we're the most energy deprived. But when you and it's really cool because the technologies are there. So solar is one of many different options, right? So traditionally, most places are electrified through formal grids and lines, and you have your meter. And what's happened in the last 20 years is you can actually provide energy to people in what they call a modular way, right? So instead of having to build out like a big power plant and big transmission lines, there's something called decentralized energy where you consume the power where you are. And so you install a solar panel, you have a control box, and then people can like plug into that, right? That's really cool. The tech is there. But most of those systems, even the basic ones where you're just doing lighting and maybe a radio and some basic phone charging, you're looking at least $200, right? And if like the average person in Sierra Leone, a big chunk of people are below the poverty line. And so we were really interested in like reach and energy access in rural areas where most of the challenges were. So you can't go into a village and somebody's like struggling to eat and survive and say, hey, we're going to sell you a $200 home system. And so that's where the financial inclusion aspect comes in. What we basically do is there's like a bi-directional communication in our systems. So we can switch it off remotely. So what we do is we like have an agent and we find somebody in the community who's quite trusted, and we say, hey, we realize your village doesn't have power. Are you, and we actually work through the elders typically, so the chief structures, so the headman in rural communities, and they recommend some, a few people. They go through a process, and then one person's onboarded, and then they have to like get leads. And what they do is they go to people and say, hey, they do their pitch, and they say, but you can take this home for only like, $5 or $10, right? And then, but they like say, but how, why would you trust me? And it's like, well, if you don't pay, the system doesn't work. And so that allows us to kind of de-risk it. But it's not just the tech, because I think we don't just sell it as like a fintech solution. It's also about the people and having people who know the people, right? So I know your uncle. I went to school with your sister.
Right.
And so if somebody doesn't pay, there's also that like relationship aspect. So basically what we do is, we find somebody in the community, we give them a bunch of inventory, and then they get a couple of deposits. We install the systems for free, and then people pay it off anywhere between like, some people can do it in 2 or 3 months, but then we do it up to 2 years of financing. And that allows, you can imagine now you're spending like $1 or $2 a week versus like having to pay that upfront. And then what people actually do is they also get a credit score through us, because now you've been paying for an asset. The same way if you like have a car and you get like a credit arrangement, that goes into your credit score. Here there's no formal credit scores, so you can't just like find somebody and be like, hey, what's your credit score?
Right.
And so what we do is we see how they paid, and then if they've paid really well, we might offer them another product at a 0 deposit. So now this time you don't have to pay. And so that's basically the business model. So we have like solar lanterns, which is just like a basic light, which is helpful even in like urban areas. When the grid goes off, you just have like a lamp. And then we have like kits where you have lights, and then you have add-on appliances like TVs. We've done freezers. Yeah, we also do like traditional kind of bigger installations for like bigger houses and then commercial industrial clients. So that's like what you traditionally think of, like, an array of solar panels, a big set of batteries and an inverter. And so, we kind of do the full spectrum.
I was actually just going to ask you that. I was going to ask you about the range of customers. So obviously you have the rural individual living maybe even a Pambodi. So someone living in there, you put panels on top of that, all the way up to industrial sized business, right?
Yep. Yeah. So there's a place called the Hub Hotel. There's a few like factories and farms we've done across. We're about to hopefully do the port of Freetown. So kind of do the full range. But people in Pambodis in urban areas. But then I don't know if people know Dati Block House, Dati House. So it's like literally just like mud, and then it's like sort of baked, and then they make bricks, and then you literally just stack them up, and you sometimes put a bit of straw, or sometimes if you've got a bit of money you can we do all of that, the full spectrum. And I think one of the things that I'm most proud about is there's like these little impacts that you don't realize. I think one of and I used to be in the field like a big chunk of the time when we were setting up, so like out there learning Kriung, sometimes trying to learn Timni, which is a language of one of the tribes here. And when you're starting a business, and so much of this business is about trust, because it's not like you're bringing a tech solution or like a sort of technical solution rather. What you're doing is actually convincing people to part with their hard-earned money, and they don't have a lot of it, and they're used to people selling them dreams basically and not delivering. So there's a lot of people that come in and out with programs or companies, especially it was just post-Ebola. So there was a couple of companies that like went under. So you have to prove that you're here to stay. And so much of, I would say the first 2 years was just finding out how to build the trust and relationships and say, we're here for you. And so that's like our slogan was Nabete Power, which is like the better power. And even there was a time we had a slogan, Power You Can Trust, because, really it was like people are so used to not believing in energy. And so even myself as a founder, I had to like be out there understanding our consumer. And so it was like out in the rural areas. At the time, the butchering Creole, butchering Timni. Yeah, but then just realizing that these are like human beings that have aspirations and dreams, and, trying to meet them halfway. And I think that to me is like something, super passionate about the human connection, and like not treating them like beneficiaries or people that we're trying to save, just people who are,
You probably don't realize this, but how much, like, I had study hour 7 to 8 p.m. and it's dark outside. Right? Like when I went to boarding school in Pennsylvania, we had a forced study hour at 7 to 8 p.m. And of course we had Quail lights.
Yeah.
But can you imagine having no light and not being able to study at night, or having to study under a candle.
Yeah.
And it really does impact your education, not having electricity.
Oh, yeah.
You really don't realize how far it impacts an individual until you're here on the ground and you see it, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing about privilege is that it's blind, right? And I think energy for me is one of those things that runs in the background, right? So once it's there, you don't really think about it, but it enables everything. And once it's not there, it's so much of you. I mean, anybody who's had to go through like a power cut knows like, oh, you got to kick up if you got a generator. But like, I think you talked about candles, but I think in our first pilot community, and it wasn't very popular, but most people were using kerosene. And if you go in and you smell the fumes of a kerosene lamp, like just like from a health perspective, I couldn't stay in that hut for like longer than like a minute. It was, and then I was like, kids are in here, like, you know. And so like, yeah, I think you talk about like, and the one thing we always hear is my children can study, or like other children come around. When people have like, you know, one of our solar TVs, there's like it's entertainment, family aspect. It's like, there's so many little things that we take for granted. And then one of the most, you know, I think powerful stories I had heard was by a lady who said, you know, from like a security aspect, bad things happen in the dark. And so even having her children being able to like kind of go around in her girl children basically being able to go around in the evening was not a thing, because yeah, bad things happen in the dark. And so like from like I'm a feminist and very passionate about, you know, those little things of like, can you even just illuminate a community where, you know, things are seen and not happening in the dark. So that's like one of the things that I think we don't talk about as much, but it's a super
tertiary effects of having light.
Yeah.
Okay, and so we talked a little bit about the product, to talk about who the customers are, the impact of it. I was gonna ask you, like, what do you love about it? It seems like you mentioned that, but do you have any other things that you've seen as like benefits that have really impacted you in terms of what you've been doing here with Easy Solar?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's the customer side, which I think I've spoken about a bit, which is, you know, giving people the foundation of what I think everybody should have. To me, sometimes I'm like, we shouldn't be here. This shouldn't be something that a company is having to solve in 2023. But the fact that we are, and you know, a million lives is not a joke, right? We were driving through, so we have an office in Liberia. We've been talking a lot about Sierra Leone, but we have an office in Liberia. And we drive through down, now that the road's better. Taking a while for a lot of the roads to get good. But so we're at like one of the toll gates. And so we have a big contract with the Sierra Leonean government where people who are in the civil service, so military, teachers, police, government workers can sign up with a zero deposit, and then they get their credit like automatically deducted from their payroll. So it's been a big source of growth for us. Anyway, reason why I'm saying this is like we get to checkpoint and there's a military guy and he sees the car and has Easy Solar. He's like, hey, Easy Solar. And he's like, I love your products. I love it. And he just like, you know, it was an unsolicited testimonial, and he was talking about his kids, and he was talking about the movies he was watching, and he was talking about just like, you know, like, and I was like, okay, like literally this guy just saw a logo on the side of a car. And, you know, and even when you drive through at all the checkpoints, because now most of the military and police have they're like, yeah, Easy Solar, you know, and so I think that thing of like having a brand, which is, it's not just like selling people stuff. It's like, oh, I've been using it, and like my experience last night was a big, like literally at night, last night was, you know, supported by you guys. And so you're a daily part of people's lives. I think the other thing I would add is like, you know, when you build a company, we have about 300 full-time staff, and then we have another 500 commission-based people spread across both countries. And I'm quite young, I'm like 32. So I started this, I was like 27, 25, no, sorry, 24, 25 on maths. Yeah, I mean, I'd never run a company before. Like, we were literally just people with an idea. We never thought it would get this big. And just seeing some of the people that have grown through the ranks, and like, it's people that probably wouldn't have had access to a lot of educational opportunities. And because we're in all 16 of the 16 districts, we're literally, you know, like people can start as an agent. You know, we have one example of somebody who started, she's amazing, she's brilliant. She started as an agent, you know, started like owning her own like set of agents, and is now like running her whole territory. Fatima Shore, shout out. And like, yeah, just like, she's just a badass boss lady. And probably wouldn't have had as many opportunities in Lunsar, were not for Easy Solo. So those things I'm really proud of, and I think I can say without with the most humility, but then also just saying I think we are really changing lives as well by creating opportunities.
Absolutely. And I know few employees, know some current ones, and the pride that they have because of the impact that you're having as a business. Not so many people post their company's social media posts on their stories, but Easy Solar, they definitely do.
I did yesterday as well.
Yes, I mean, you really see the pride that people have working for this organization, and it's amazing to see as someone from the outside looking in, right? So that's awesome, and I think that that's great. So we talked about, of course, the benefits and the positives. It's not an interview without asking you what some of the challenges are, and I always like to ask the question about challenges because so many of you want to come here with rose-colored glasses and have the idea that, it's Africa, you're excited, but you do need to know there are going to be challenges in business here. You want to start a business here. What you've been through it all. You've been in the provinces, you've been here in Freetown, you're in Liberia as well. I'd love to hear from you. What are some of the challenges that you see running a business, especially a business this size here in Sierra Leone?
Yeah, the challenges question is always interesting because I'm like, how do I frame it? But yeah. I think the challenges never stop, they evolve. And so, really, I think if you run a company and you're expecting just to have an idea and have everything run smoothly, just don't. And if you're not somebody who has a tenacity and resilience, forget about it, especially in a context like this. But I think if you're somebody who gets excited by the potential and, frames every every challenge you face as an opportunity to maybe test yourself, test other people, change narratives, push things in a different way, then I think you actually get a little bit emboldened by it because it's like, I'm going to show you that we can do this, we can overcome this. And so I would probably say the first set of challenges are very different to what we face now. So a lot of it was like just building a team, convincing people we went crazy, finding office space, even just because the standards you have of I was in charge of building the brand and had to find designers and creative designers, and people would put stuff together and I was like, no. And, people thinking you're fussy when you have a particular idea of what you want. And even from we're not perfect on customer experience. I'm going to caveat, we try. But in the beginning, just pushing stuff at people rather than having a conversation, really trying to understand people's challenges. So even just teaching people how to have a sales pitch, right? Sure. Those things are really, I think it's a bit of a mindset change. So that was more internal, getting the right people, having the right partnerships, not backing down when you have an idea of what something can be, and not just okay, but this is how we do it here. Right. And it's and then when people are oh, you're a foreigner, what do you know? And it's there's this balancing act between I'm gonna try and meet you halfway and accept that, without kind of having this kind of, I would say, colonial idea of imposing, but then also not backing down and being I'm gonna, okay, maybe you don't see this, I'm gonna show you. And sometimes you have to actually develop those skills yourself and invest and be okay, I'm gonna teach myself Adobe, I'm gonna take a few courses, and I'm gonna just show you. That's what I meant. It's not perfect, but that's what I meant. Or even just bringing in people for a little bit to help train up local people on how to kind of get the standards. So we had a couple of instances. I mean, we were very passionate about having a predominantly Sierra Leonean team, especially being foreigners. But there were times where we had to either have an agency or somebody come in for 3 months and just show what the standard could be. So I think that was the first set of challenges. And I think the other challenge is we have a foreign investment, or we have sort of private investment rather. And most people Sierra Leone, no. Everyone wants to invest. I mean, not everyone. Africa is a crazy place to for a lot of investors. And so even the Ghanas, the Kenyas, the darlings of the world, it's not easy. And so convincing people that we're running a company in Sierra Leone, that was probably a big challenge, and getting our first set of investment. But I think the opportunity and the fact that you had this ability to make an impact. So we kind of just had to build a proof of concept, show with our own kind of funds that we had got from Colombia. Sure. And just really bootstrap our way a little bit. And I think I encourage people as much as you can, with the resources you have, bootstrap, be innovative, use limited resources and show people what's possible, whether it's, within the country or sometimes outside if you need external support. So that was kind of the beginning, the kind of mindset change and the narrative shift. And then I think as we've grown, I would probably say pick a challenge. I think kind of you building a company, I think for anyone's really, really tough. So retaining talent, I think is a big one. But then also like the kind of macro environment in Sierra Leone has changed quite a bit. So I think when we started, not that it was perfect, but there was like, a good sort of like policies in place for renewable energy. Those policies have since been rolled back. So, and then the exchange rate, like if you have any business where some part of your business is like getting stuff in USD,
right,
and then most of your business is getting stuff in local currency, like to watch the value of your revenue kind of shrink and the value of what you have to order increase. Like literally last year, the Leone, like its value halved, and you can imagine we're collecting stuff on credit, right? And up to 2 years. And so the people we sold to like back in 2020, they're making their payments. Those payments are worth half. And so that's quite challenging. I think that's probably the biggest challenge. And coupled with this, I think everyone's facing this cost of living crisis. So people's pockets are shrinking, and the business's revenue value is shrinking. So you have to grow more in order to get to where you were before. And if I can add one last thing, there's this also you're a human running a company. And so, being far away from my family was a tough one. My dad retired while, I was here, and that was a big challenge to be away from my family. There was some health issues. So, kind of even just like taking care of your mental health. And then when you have like those like personal challenges and you don't have running water for a week, and I eventually invested in one of our own systems, but can you believe for the first like couple of years, I had to generate it myself, which is gotta get high on your own supply in this case. But no, like, so the first couple of years, like just basic utilities. And then if you get sick, not being able to get a proper diagnosis. I got malaria the first few months I was here. I got really sick. And then, so I think running a business is hard enough with all those kind of, you're not from here, you're a foreigner, people don't always understand your vision, and investors don't fully understand the context. And then, the kind of government as a whole, sometimes, people don't always believe in what you're doing. And I think it's easy for people now to look and see where we are and be like, oh, you guys are successful. But like that coupled with coming home and then sometimes feeling very alone and being like, there's nobody here that fully understands me.
Okay, cool. So you were just finishing the last challenge, right? Okay, so let's just jump back into there.
Yeah, I think I got sick. I think the first few months I was here, got pretty bad malaria, and then didn't really have anybody. I went through a really dark period, honestly, like where I think the first year was, I wouldn't say depressed, but like kind of like asking what the hell I'm doing here. And I think the business is my anchor in some ways. Like there was this balance between what we were doing versus like, dude, you could have just gone off after grad school and had like a really nice career, and like, is this actually going to go anywhere? I actually ended my three-year relationship a few months after coming in because we couldn't do the long distance. He wasn't willing to come here. So yeah, there was all of that, which is like just the real human life challenges. And then finding like a group of friends and yeah, just finding people that you can sort of relate to. Yeah, so I mean, I won't say it's like lonely in the beginning, but I think you shouldn't like, you can come here with a very like sort of focused mission. Sure. The reality can hit you in the face of just where you are. And so finding like an anchor within yourself, I would say. Like I have like a couple of good friends who are just, at the time they were Skype. I Skyped with quite often, and I ended up going home like every like 3 or 4 months, just for my sanity, I think, just to remember who I was. And it's now, I think Sierra Leone's a big part of my identity, but at the time I was like, I just had to kind of get that reset and just get that flush of energy. Yeah, so I think that was probably it for, and it never really stops. I think you get frustrated every, a few months or few weeks, depending on the season. Rainy season. Also, don't come, like, I just celebrated my 7th living here anniversary, 31st of July. And anybody who knows August in Sierra Leone is like the rainiest time.
It's raining right now.
So, I wrote a journal every day for the first year I was here. It's funny to go back. And like, it was like, I think probably one of the more hectic rainy seasons. So I was just like stuck, like I couldn't do much. And so you were just in your head. I shaved off all of my hair. I was like, I'm doing this. So I lost my relationship, lost like, cut off my hair, cut off, basically access to my family and friends. And then, it was 100% just building the business. So like looking back on it now, it is a bit crazy. I think it was nice because I was starting from ground zero personally, right, professionally, and just took it as like an experience. It's like worst can happen is like I either go back to South Africa or the States, and it was something I tried to do, but I'm glad I stuck it out. Yeah.
So it was like a reset.
It was a complete reset.
Okay.
And I think I left not everything behind, but I was like, I'm gonna do this 100%, and I'm just gonna endure. And yeah, I mean, I think we had just a really great team. I think we like the three of us really just were all in it, all in. So I think if you have people that you're doing it with or very early on can find that tribe, then you can lean on each other a bit. And I think if I had done it alone, I'm not sure if I would have made it. Yeah.
Got it. And on that note, what advice would you give to anyone coming to Sierra Leone to start a business?
So, I mean, there's a lot of opportunities. Like, I think, like, anytime I'm like frustrated with something, I'm like, oh, this is a business opportunity.
Right.
Like, somebody could do this.
Yes.
So I think also if you're like from a society where everything's kind of like made and you're just kind of like improving or tweaking or like there's efficiency improvements, I think there's still gaps everywhere. But here you can literally be like, for example, I'm super into gardening, and like it's like there's no garden supply store, or like all the nurseries are like side nurseries like on the side of the roads, and so I was like thinking about like a tea garden concept where you come and then you have like like kind of like a form of gardening space, and you can have like your actual compost and just stuff like if you were into gardening you can do. And so I think for me, like little examples of stuff like that where even if you're doing a business full time, you can come and think about stuff like that. But I think come here, it depends on like if you've come here with an idea, I definitely think like understand the landscape first. So we came in with an idea, but we were very willing to the first visit was just listening to people, right, doing a survey, not coming in pitching a product. So we had a lot of conversations from across the board, customers, but then also potential. We had like a couple of people introduce us to people who potentially work with us, government. So really like kind of just scanning the landscape, because you can come in with a very like sort of external idea and not understanding context. So I think that's probably first. And then we came in and we did a pilot as well, where we tested, right? That's our business. So I think it depends on really what you want to do. But I think, listen, scan, come in and test, and be prepared to be wrong and be prepared to pivot. And I think it's that balancing act of what I said of like, you have to find that middle ground between bringing people along who may not always see where you see, but not like shutting them down to the point where they're like, I'm not following this person because they don't even see me, right?
Yes.
So it's really a balancing act, because you are coming in from a different context, which means you're seeing things very differently. And that's why I think like culture and values and a mission can anchor people, like everyone knowing why they're there. And even if we like have very different perspectives, we all be very clear about what everybody is trying to achieve here, and try and get results as quickly as possible, right? So like kind of like the kind of agile methodology. I'm trying to have my answer in a way that applies to very many different businesses. But for example, if you're trying to start a restaurant, like have a menu, but be prepared to change your menu, and then also do like use it, get feedback from people, or like be prepared to change your layout, So I think we did change a lot of the core business model stayed the same, but I think we listen to people, we try and adapt, and I think hopefully you'll come to like this mix of something that is locally centered but maybe like externally inspired, which I think is kind of where we've
centered, externally inspired.
Yeah.
Okay, so on that note, I mean, you mentioned pivoting, you mentioned be prepared to change. What's next for Easy Solar? What kind of expansion are you all looking forward to in the coming year?
Yeah, assuming that the economy doesn't tank and collapse. Yeah, so we are very excited about what we call our Power Solutions business unit, which is a larger installation, so really focusing on like commercial and industrial clients. So there's a big opportunity. Fuel prices have been going up quite significantly, so most businesses don't rely purely on the grid. They need some kind of like backup, large scale generator. So there's a lot of people trying to switch or have hybrid systems. So that's been a really fast growing business unit, and we hope to also expand that to Liberia as well. And then, yeah, we're also planning to expand into Guinea, hopefully in the next year, which will be really exciting. And then just like really deepening our penetration and bringing much more interesting products that, you know, can either plug into the energy systems people have or be supportive to an energy system. So what I mean by that is like, so we have like solar freezers, different appliances. We're actually even selling smartphones, which you can plug into your system, because we've also got credit for people. So I think we're one of the only providers in Sierra Leone offering smartphones on credit, because we understand how people pay. And then we even now have, you mentioned earlier, remittances, because we have like 300 roughly distribution points across the country. And so if you're going to come in and get energy, why not have like complementary services and products that you can do at an Easy Solar store? So if you're sending money abroad, somebody might be cashing out at an Easy Solar store. So yeah, those are the main avenues. So yeah, those are the main avenues for growth. Yeah.
Excellent. Okay, so I think we've covered a wide range of topics. I think the story is very, very interesting. I'd love to just hear from you. Where can they find Easy Solar physically and online?
Yeah, so if you're in Sierra Leone, we are present in a number of locations in Freetown. So our HQ is at Hill Station. And so it's a big blue and yellow signage. We're right by the St. Mary's turntable or roundabout. So that's our HQ. We also have a number of shops across Freetown. You can see all the locations on our website, which is www.easysolar.org. We also have a Facebook page, Easy Solar @SL, and on Twitter or X, I guess now, Easy Solar _SL, and we're also on Instagram as well, Easy Solar @SL. So please check us out.
Awesome. I really appreciate you doing this.
Okay, cool. So that was the interview with Nthabi, and that, my friends, was Easy Solar. What did you think of this content? If you thought it was good, let us know in the comments before. Also hit that thumbs up. If you know anybody planning to move to Sierra Leone to start a business and they want to know what that might be like, make sure you share this with them and tell them to watch this video all the way through to the end so they can get all that insight and information that Nthabi just gave us. All right, guys, thanks for watching. See you all on the next video. All right, guys, if you like this video, go ahead and hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell, like, comment, and share it with your friends. All right, see you on the next video.